Hey everybody, and welcome to Healthy Living. My guest today is none other than John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, the co-founder of Whole Foods, and the co-author of this wonderful new book called The Whole Foods Diet, the life-saving plan for health and longevity. Thank you so much for being here, John. It's such an honor to talk to you.
It's great to talk to you too, Chef AJ.
Because I've never really talked to you at length. I mean, we saw each other at the McDougall Advanced Study Weekend where you heard me speak. I met you at one of RIP's events. I saw you on the cruise. So I'm so excited to talk about you because who is John Mackey? Because my favorite chapter of the book was the one that was called Change Your Plate, Change Your World. Because I really felt that I got to know a little bit about you in that chapter. I love that you talked about the concept of ahisma and said that there are very few areas of life where we have the chance to reduce suffering so directly and dramatically as the decision to abstain from consuming animal flesh or other products. And I thought that spoke volumes about who you are as a person. And I bet a lot of people, I know they know your name, but I bet they don't know this about you. So tell us a little bit about you and how this came to be, how you became this person that cares so deeply about animals and the environment and yet running the greatest store in the world.
Well, that's my personal favorite chapter in the book.
Me too.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because it's chapter 13, a lot of people don't get to that chapter in the book. A lot of the vegan community will not read the book because we advocate 100% whole foods, but from a health standpoint, 90% to 100% plant-based. And that's very upsetting. We've got wiggle room in here. This doesn't seem, but we make a distinction in the book between what we think the science indicates in terms of the healthiest diet based on the research and the evidence that we have. And certainly 100% plant-based diet is what all three authors are.
Right.
All three are committed vegans. But I just know a lot of the criticisms that I've gotten are clearly from people who didn't read the book.
Right.
And are just upset about that 10%. So I oftentimes say, you clearly didn't read my book because if you had, you'd know where I stand and you would have read chapter 13 if you read the book and you'd forgive me, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So I do make a distinction between, and Matt Alone and I make a distinction between what we think the science indicates for health and what we think is optimum from an ethical, environmental standpoint. And those aren't necessarily completely synced up. So anyway, there's that. But in terms of myself, I was a vegetarian in my early 20s for a couple of decades, and then I began to slide away from it a little bit. I had fish to I got involved with a woman who got me eating fish, and I know it's a darn good thing.
Those women.
But then about 14 years ago now, I had an epiphany, and I read a dozen books or so about animal livestock treatment in America, and it was instigated by an animal activist named Lauren Ornelius. And without retelling that entire story, which has been told, it's easy to find that out in the public realm. It's not a big secret. The summer of 2003, right about now, is when I committed to becoming a vegan, and I've been a vegan ever since, an ethical vegan. I always feel like once you become an ethical vegan, then you're not likely to backslide. I was not an ethical vegetarian so much as I was sort of a hipster vegetarian, which I think a lot of young people today become vegan sort of as a cool thing to do, as a trendy thing, and because they're not grounded in the ethics or the environment as a stance, they oftentimes drift away from it, as I did from my early vegetarianism. So it's still upsetting to many people. They don't understand why I can compartmentalize my life to be running a Whole Foods market, which is it's an omnivore store. It sells meat and animal foods, and of course, it's also led the way for a lot more plant-based foods as well.
Yep.
And it's hard for people to understand that in business, you set standards up, but you also have to meet people where you find them. And particularly when we started the company, gosh, now my first store was started 39 years ago. And then the first Whole Foods opened 37 years ago. And there just weren't any vegans. I had never met a vegan back then. And the first store I had, Saferway, was a vegetarian store. And it was very pure. We didn't sell any sugar. We didn't sell any alcohol. We didn't sell meat. We didn't sell caffeine. Very, very pure and healthy. And it also just did almost no sales.
I was just going to say, and it didn't have any customers.
Exactly. And when we decided to merge with another store that sold those things, it was decided that if we were going to be a real grocery store, we needed to sell real foods, but we needed to sell foods that the market really wanted to buy, and that included animal foods and beer and wine and some sugar. And the Whole Foods quality standards that we have today were really formed in those very early days back in 1980 is when Whole Foods Market opened its first big store. So it bothers other people. To me, it's been the way to fulfill our higher purpose.
Yeah.
Is we have changed the way America eats. We have done a lot to promote plant-based living, eating real foods and whole foods, and so Whole Foods has made a big difference in the world. And Saferway never would have made a big difference.
Right,
we would have been very pure and affected almost no one.
Yeah.
Which I oftentimes say that in any kind of movement, there's two polarities in any kind of movement. I've been part of lots of movements. I've been part of the organic movement. I've been part of the freedom movement. I've been part of the animal movement. I'm on the board of directors for the Humane Society. I care deeply about animals. And in every movement, there's two polarities. There's the Puritans, or the purity people, the most idealistic, and then the pragmatists. And every movement needs both. And they have a dialectic. The most idealistic people, the purist people, make sure that the movement maintains high ideals and strives for the very best that can be achieved. And the pragmatists have to translate that into things that the marketplace or the world that we find it will accept at that time. So the really most effective pragmatist is one who's an idealist, who keeps the longer term goals of the movement in their minds, but is prepared to make small compromises to move things along. And the Puritans judged and attacked the pragmatists as hypocrites and liars and hoaxes. And I've been attacked for those things pretty much my entire adult life. And yet I'm a pragmatist. I'm an idealistic pragmatist. So you can see in all the different things that I've done in the world that meeting people where they're at and helping to move things along has been my basic strategy, and I'd say it's pretty effective.
Right. And, I agree with you that unless you're an abolitionist, somebody is going to criticize or attack you. I've been vegan for 40 years now, and I'm still not vegan enough for some of the people in the movement. So I get where you're coming from. But I want to just say I love your store. I appreciate your stores. As somebody that's been traveling for 6 years, when I accept a job, one of the things I look for is there going to be a Whole Foods in that city? Because I will not live in a city where there's not a Whole Foods, because just based on your salad bar. I mean, yes, there are things in the store that I would avoid, and not everything in Whole Foods is whole or even what I would consider food, but you make food that I can eat. And so I'm so happy. And also just the whole experience, your employees are always friendly. They're always kind. They're always helpful. It's just a good experience. It's like being with family. When you shop at your store, about 15 years ago when I became disabled and I was using a service dog. And this is way before everybody had a service dog. And I remember I used to go to stores like Walmart or the bank, and I would be challenged on public access, penal code 365.5. Never happened at Whole Foods. It's like your employees are, I love your stores. I'm so blessed that I can actually walk to one of them. And so thank you. Now the name Whole Foods, great name. You picked the best name possible. Did you come up with that name?
Yeah, so the story of the name is kind of a good story. again, first store was called Safer Way Natural Foods. We play on Safe Way, Safer Way. And that was a small, tiny store in Austin. As I said, it was very pure, very, very, very holier than thou, and not very successful. And then when we decided to merge with another natural food store, they were called Clarksville Natural Grocery. They were only about a mile away from us. But we had a good relationship. We were friends. And so it was, let's put these stores together and create a big store. It can be a full-line grocery supermarket. But of course, neither one of us wanted the other person's name. So we had to come up with a new name. And we did it, we got each word backwards. We started with, well, we're a market. We really like the name market because it's a marketplace. Market seems like a good name. And then what kind of market is it? Well, it's a food market. So we got the foods part. And it's like, well, what kind of foods market is it? And we put different modifiers in front of that. Well, it's a healthy foods market. It's a real foods market. It's a natural foods market. It's organic foods market. But ultimately, the word we chose, it's a whole foods market. And well, lucky for us, that name was a very good brand because we didn't have any brand. We didn't hire anybody to figure it out for us. And it's turned out to be it's defined a movement in a way.
It's great. And I love how you talk about, I wasn't going to bring up the part that you brought up until the end because I wanted to tell you everything that I loved about your book. And it's not that I didn't like that, but you're right that before I asked to interview you, one of the reasons I did was because people kept saying, did you see the book? Did you see the book? He's recommending animal products. You're not recommending animal products. You're allowing them. And there's a big difference because none of you that wrote the book, you, Dr. Letterman, Dr. Poolday, are telling people that they have to or they need to or they should. So there's a big difference between recommending something and allowing people to do it if that is what they're going to do anyway. So let's make that distinction. So you say that...
Thank you. That's correct.
Yes.
We do not ever in the book recommend people eat animal foods. We make it clear that all three authors are 100% plant-based and have been for a number of years. We wrote a chapter about the environmental, ethical implications of being 100% plant-based. In fact, we invite people at the end of chapter 13 to join us in being 100% plant-based.
Absolutely.
So, but here's the reality. I mean, gosh, depending on statistics you look at, somewhere like 3% of the American population are 100% plant-based or 100% vegan. That's up from a lot. It's up from 0% as far as I know when I got started in my business, or as a statistical reality, it was closer to 0 than it was to 1. Most people are going to eat animal foods.
Yes.
And that's where we find ourselves. That might not be the case in 50 years or 100 years, but that's where we find ourselves now. And I think people who call for 100% immediate abolition, whereas I can agree with that ethically, and it's just simply not possible. It's at this time. It may be possible later. So if we're going to help people live healthier lives, I have found if you give people, it's very hard for most people to think I'm going to become a vegan. And that'll keep them from changing their diet and becoming much healthier if that becomes foods that they just are completely unwilling to 100% give up. But here's what I discovered, Chef AJ, is that people go through, you have to evolve your taste buds. It's hard for people to shift to a whole foods plant-based diet overnight. Some people can do it, but for most people it's a journey. And our palates have to become re-educated so that we come to enjoy the taste of real foods without heavy sugar, heavy salt, heavy fat, and heavy animal protein. And that's a process. So if we get people under 10%, they'll find that their craving for it begins to lessen. It's a lot easier to go from 10 to 0 than it is to go from 35% to 0.
Sure.
So I actually think we're going to make a lot more vegans through this book than the typical strategy is.
Yes.
Kind of lulling people into, hey, go along with this, dude. Get it under 10% and watch what happens to your blood sugar, your weight, your cholesterol, and your blood pressure, and those are going to get a lot better. And then I've just seen a lot of people do this.
Right. Exactly. No, just I don't want to disagree with you, but just to play devil's advocate for a minute, because I run a program based on food addiction, and according to Dr. Barnard in his book Breaking the Food Seduction, meat is one of the most addictive foods. So can people really do 10% is my first question, and how do we know what 10% is? And the second question is the way I think of it is, I know that there are no studies yet comparing somebody that eats 10% of their calories from animal products to being 100% vegan. But there's also no studies saying that comparing somebody that smokes one cigarette a day to no cigarettes a day. It's possible that you could smoke one cigarette a day and not get lung cancer, but then should we still allow people to smoke cigarettes? So just maybe you can comment on that.
Oh, I think that's a bad analogy, because I think there are certain drugs, nicotine, heroin, cocaine, where we know users, if you use those regularly, you're going to get addicted to them. So I know almost no one who smokes one cigarette a day.
Exactly.
It's very difficult to do that. And because it tends to, you build tolerance and it escalates. Mm-hmm. I know plenty of people that are flexitarians, who eat a little bit of animal foods once or twice a week, and seem to be fine that way. So, I mean, I know people who, like myself, who drink alcohol, and it's not a healthy food. I probably have about maybe 1 to 2 drinks a week, and so alcohol is highly addicting too. So is meat more addicting than alcohol? I don't think so. So there may be some people that you're absolutely right. They've got to go cold turkey, or they're never going to throw it off. Mm-hmm. We're on a continuum, a bell curve. I don't think that's true for most people. It wasn't true in my own life, so perhaps that's one reason why I'm sympathetic to that point of view.
Well, I agree with you, John, that any time we can get people to eat more plants and less animals, we're going in the right direction. So thank you. And as far as taste buds adjusting, you've got lots of delicious recipes in this book. The one that I'm anxious to try first is the garden stuffed potato cacciatore. That's the one that really jumped out at me.
Well, you're such a great chef. If you like any of our recipes, I'll take that as a very high compliment.
I will let you know. So one of the things I also loved about your book is where you said, don't worry about the minutia of this or that food should be eaten, how this or that food should be eaten. If you worry about whether you should eat kale raw or cooked, or whether the potato should be baked or boiled, you can find plenty of people online who are passionately discussing one way or the other. Just eat whole plant foods. And I'm so in agreement with you. I'm so tired of this fear-mongering and reductionism about arsenic in rice and balsamic vinegar being crack, and that if we cook our food in a pressure cooker, that is not why people are fat and sick. It's because they're not eating whole plant food. So thank you for saying that.
Well, there is a tendency, again, in any kind of movement, for people to focus on the differences and make a big deal out of the minutia, the things that are sort of McDougall focuses on the starch foods. Furman's going to focus more on eating more vegetables. Greger's going to have his own perspective. Colin Campbell has his own perspective, and Esselstyn has his own perspective. So the thing is, they agree on about 99%.
Right. But we focus on the little things.
They fight on the 1% differences,
and that's what everybody makes the biggest deal about. It's crazy.
So we tried to make this book a synthesis in a way. We called Whole Foodie Heroes a number of people who, is it a perfect list? Obviously not.
No, because I'm not on it. No, I'm just kidding. I was on honorable mention. So
you're on the honorable mention?
I was first in honorable mention. That was so kind of you. Thank you. Maybe next book I will get to the...
I'm pretty convinced that I didn't get invited on Dr. Oz.
Yeah.
I talked with Dr. Oz because I didn't make him a Whole Foodie hero, so he wouldn't put me on his show.
Oh, that's funny. That's so funny. That is hilarious. So I love where you say one thing you say is that the most common reason people struggle with the transition to a whole food plant-based diet is that they don't eat enough, and that you're more likely to fail from eating too little than eating too much. I couldn't agree more, because you really follow not just a whole food plant-based diet, but I'm pretty sure pretty close to mine, where it's sugar, oil, and salt free, and you understand calorie density, so you have to eat more food.
Yes. Well, we probably had this experience where you've gone to a restaurant and it's not a vegan restaurant. So it's like, okay, well, here, I want you to cook me something. Chef comes out, chef's talking to me, what do you want? I said, well, look, I'm very open. I just want to be 100% plant-based. I don't want any oil. I don't want any refined grains. I don't want any sugar, just 100% real food. That almost always ends up being like a plate of steamed vegetables.
And you'll starve, yeah.
And if you look at the calories, it's
like
just giving me 100 calories.
100 calories for a big plate of food, right?
So until you understand those principles that you need to eat, if you're eating real plant foods, you need to be full, because you're just not getting enough calories, particularly if you're not eating gobs of nuts and seeds.
Right.
And that's the conversation you and I have had before. And if you're eating just small quantities of nuts and seeds, you're not eating any oil, unless you're eating a lot of starch foods, a lot of beans and whole grains, and potatoes and sweet potatoes, frankly, you're just not getting enough calories.
Right.
And I mean, McDougall once told me, he says, well, John, if you don't eat nuts and seeds, you don't eat oils, you're eating nothing but vegetables, you're going to starve to death.
And he's right. He's right.
He is right.
He's absolutely right. You talked on page 214 about 3-stage eating, which is very similar to what I teach, which is you still eating large quantities of food, but you eat the most calorie dilute foods first, which are also the most nutrient dense. So we really are kindred spirits, just so you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course we are.
Yeah. So I love that. So one of the things I also liked is, and by the way, your co-authors, Matt and Alona, friends of mine, Dr. Letterman and Pool Day, there was one point, and I like when people disagree, actually, because if everybody agrees, there's nothing to talk about. But there was one point that you disagreed with them on, and I'm not really sure where I stand yet on that subject, which was the supplementation with DHA and EPA. And when I saw you at McDougall, I said, why don't you sell Purslane? It's the most highest in essential omega-3 fatty acids, and you told me, you said, because you're the only one that would buy it. That's what you told me.
Well, it is about, we probably tried to sell it, and nobody buys it, you just throw it away, and you don't reorder it. But that was Matt and Alona and I spent more time arguing about DHA and EPA than we probably did talking about any other subject, because we do basically agree on virtually everything. We had some talk about, is it how much animal foods to allow in the diet? Is it 7%? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Obviously, we don't exactly know. And the slippery slope argument's important, which is, well, if people really stuck to 10%, but are they going to do that?
Sure.
And do they really? So so we had to give guidelines of what that actually means in a normal diet. But the DHA EPA is a very good question, and I think if you cut oil out of your diet, it's a lot less important question, because you're not going to get too many omega-6s, unless, of course, you're gobbling down several handfuls a day of almonds or cashews, and you're not eating any flax seeds or whatever. But I just decided, when I studied the research, and I have to admit that influenced here by both Furman and Greger, who do recommend supplementation there, that I just felt like the risk-reward ratio was definitely on the side of taking the supplement. So I saw very little downside risk. Right. I saw quite a deal of upside, because my father also had my father died of Alzheimer's disease, and it's like, that's one nasty disease. Sure. And I really thought that better safe than sorry on that one. And in general, you can see we don't recommend much supplementation. Right. Basically, B12, and that could be it. If you get enough sunshine for your D. Sure. And clearly you are. So
I was just in Mexico. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, right. So I'm not even sure where I stand on that continuum. But like you said, I don't see if somebody wanted to supplement with that, there's probably not a downside. So.
Also, I think I eat a lot of flax, and hemp and chia seeds as well. I mean, I just get those. I've gotten in the habit of kind of grinding them up and putting them on some of my foods.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never tested myself to see how well I convert.
Interesting.
And there is a test you can do. Have you ever done that test?
I have done the test, and last time I did it, I was normal because I haven't eaten any fats for almost 6 years. I'm going to do it again, and if I'm low, I will either add some seeds or I'll consider the supplementation.
Yeah, so I need to do that test for myself. In the
Sure.
meantime, I'm just I'm hedging.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to know what your results are. So another one of my favorite lines from the book was where you said, never underestimate the body's ability to heal given the right foods, and that an individual can often eliminate the risk of most chronic diseases with a healthy diet and lifestyle. Like, why isn't this on the front page of like every magazine? Instead of putting butter in coffee, this should be on the front page of Time magazine.
Well, as McDougall says, people never get tired of hearing good things about their bad habits.
Yeah.
So people want to be, I always say, if you want to write a best-selling diet book, just say, hey, eat all the butter and bacon that you want, and you're going to outlive those vegans for sure. I mean, people don't want to change their diets. They're afraid they're going to give up all pleasure in life if they change their diets. And so they continue to eat food, and they look for reassurance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the best-selling books are the low-carb books and paleo books and everything that allows people to eat lots of animal foods. And now I lost the thread of the original question.
It wasn't a question. I was just commenting that I love that line, and that this should be on the front page of Time magazine, saying that given the right conditions, the body can reduce or eliminate disease eating a whole plant-based diet.
I mean, think about it. Dean Ornish and Caldwell Esselstyn, the leading cause of death in the United States remains heart disease. Mm-hmm. And these guys proved no one needs to die from heart disease. Why isn't that like completely announced all the time?
Right.
Because it's the leading killer. And the great thing is, the same diet that reduces heart disease lessens your chance for all types of cancer and autoimmune diseases, and pretty much every chronic disease is lessened by a whole foods plant-based diet. Right. That should be front and cover again and again and again, but it's not there because it's not what people want to hear. There's no click-through. Nobody says, oh man, I don't want to be a vegan. And so those magazines aren't going to sell well. So that's why Mark Bittman can say butter is back, and it's a big deal. And nobody's going to say, you know what, you should eat more collard greens and kale and actually sweet potatoes and beans, and you're going to be a lot healthier. Yeah. There's no market for it, or there's a very small market for it. Not to mention, Chef AJ, there's also strong economic interest here.
Well, of course. Yes.
You've got these fake studies, or these that are being funded by the dairy industry and the Cattlemen's Association and the pork producers and the processed food industries that are basically trying to reassure people that this diet is not killing them. In fact, they need to exercise more.
Right.
Or it's genetics. Or you just need to take the right pills. I mean, I'll tell you a story. My brother-in-law is type 2 diabetic. And I gave him Neil Barnard's book, Dr. Barnard's Program to Prevent and Reverse Type 2 Diabetes. You know, gave it to him as a gift. He looked through it, he thumbed through it, and he gave it back to me. He said, I don't want this. And I said, well, what do you mean you don't want it? I said, this book will cure your diabetes. Yeah. And he said, John, look, I just thumbed through this book. It's just pushing a vegan diet. I'm not going to eat a vegan diet. And I said, Greg, what do you mean you're not going to eat? You've got type 2 diabetes. You know, that's a terrible disease. You can reverse and cure this disease, and you can do it in like 30 days. He said, my doctor says it's not possible. And I said, well, your doctor's wrong. I mean, we have this program at Whole Foods Market, the Total Health Immersion. We sent thousands of our team members through this program, and I've seen hundreds of people reverse their type 2 diabetes, so don't tell me it can't be done. He said, John, with all due respect, you're a grocer. He's a doctor. I think he knows a lot more about this than you do. And I said, apparently he doesn't. But he wouldn't change his diet, and he wouldn't read the book. He was totally closed. So I said, Greg, you know, it's your life. You can do what you want, and I'm sorry you feel that way.
How is he now?
He's still type 2 diabetic. He's still taking his insulin.
Wow.
He's still alive, but probably I don't give him a long-term. Eventually, that will catch up.
You may be a grocer, but you definitely know more than his doctor. You know, it's funny because my brother died from complications of diabetes, and I remember in 1987, I sent him Dr. McDougall's book. Now, my brother was a medical doctor, and I sent him McDougall's book, and he sent it back to me unread with a note saying, "Can't eat carbs, they make me fat." And then I wanted to say, well, whatever you're reading now is still making you fat, which brings me to the next point. I loved the chapter called The Great Grain Robbery, Rethinking the Low-Carb Trend. After your story, that was my favorite chapter, I think, because you said, next time your friend orders that bacon cheeseburger without the bun because carbs make you fat, you'll know that, yes, refined white flour buns probably will make you fat and sick as well, but so will the processed meat burger. Whole carbohydrates, in fact, do quite the opposite. This is such a misconception in the world. We have Dr. Mark Hyman writing books like Eat Fat, Get Thin. Like you say, people want good news about their bad habits. I love that chapter.
Yeah, I think that this is maybe the single area in nutrition that people are most confused about. If people ask me, what are people most confused about healthy eating, I would say they don't make a distinction between sugar and refined carbohydrates and whole food carbohydrates. They don't make a distinction between those simple carbs and the complex carbs, the starches and the sugars, because they think it's all sugar. But yet the starch foods, the whole starch foods are full of fiber. They completely affect the body in a different way. In fact, those are super healthy foods. They completely correlate with longevity and less cancer, less heart disease. And yet people throw the baby out with the bathwater here. And this is a terrible, terrible thing, and it's what people are so confused about. And here's the thing. Sugar is really bad for you. It's not a healthy food. And science is pretty compelling that that's just a very bad food. And refined grains hit your blood sugar very similarly to how just refined sugar does. Mm-hmm. So people make the mistake of then trying to avoid everything. And then in order to get enough calories, then you're thrown back on eating more animal protein and more fat. So it's essential if people are going to heal their diseases, they have to begin to eat starch foods, whole food starch foods as the basis for their calories in their diets. And unfortunately, I explain that again and again and again. Mm-hmm. People don't get it. It's like, I don't know why. I don't understand why there's this confusion about it. It seems so crystal clear to me. You know what I've tried to do lately that gets people to understand this? Because people don't understand about oil either, right? So I say, look, what is sugar? Sugar is a whole plant food that stripped away all the fiber, all the nutrients until there's just pure carbohydrate. And that's what sugar is. Nothing but pure carbohydrate with nothing else with it. And so you understand that that's not a healthy food. Well, what is oil? Oil is a whole plant food. It's stripped away all the fiber, all the nutrients, and all you're left with is pure fat. So neither pure carbohydrate nor pure fat is healthy. Whole foods that have all the fiber, have carbohydrates, have some fats, have some protein, full of nutrients, full of phytochemicals, that's the food you need to be eating, not the pure sugar, not the pure fat. Eat real foods, eat whole foods. But people have no problem eating oil, the pure fat, not understanding that that's damaging their health, but they think the pure carbohydrate is absolutely poison. Yeah. And they're both not healthy foods.
Exactly. You know, I always thought it would be fun. I know that at one point you were using the nutrient density scale in your store, especially in the produce section. I always thought it would be fun if you had like an anti-nutrient density scale and actually like labeled the sugar and the oil and the meat with how deleterious it was, sort of like cigarettes with a warning label, because you could still sell it, but you could just tell your customers that this has a nutrient density of like -1,000 or something like that.
You know, we actually had that serious discussion. We were going to absolutely label every food in the store based on kind of its healthiness. And what ended up happening is that what we think would have happened is that the media would have gone absolutely crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They would have, the foods that we said were not healthy, that were in our center store, that we gave a labeling to, we'd have been blasted all over the media. Whole Foods admits that they're selling all this junk food that's terrible for people's health, and that type of transparency would have been probably all the executives would have been fired, and the board of directors would have been forced to take that out. So it was such a radical step,
Right.
And we just didn't have the courage to risk wrecking our business on
Sure.
that. But I'm basically sympathetic to that, and I think it could be done in a way, particularly with our merger with Amazon and with the technology that I think will be introduced to our stores, that we can do those kind of ratings, but not have it necessarily right on the shelf, but where you could scan it, and then we'd have the complete health profile of each food that's being sold, and so that any individual could get it just with their smartphone, taking a quick look at it. So I think that may be the solution to your suggestion.
Yeah, I just thought that would be really fun, because it's like when a restaurant has their nutritional information available, like McDonald's, which I never eat at, you realize, wow, I'm really not going to eat that. So that's
when that nutritional labeling is completed, it's going to begin to change people. I really think so. I mean, I'm seeing stuff show up at Whole Foods now because we're doing it, even though we don't have to do it until 2018. We're getting it in all our stores now, and the calorie counts on the foods is staggering. Like, one chocolate chip cookie, it's a pretty big chocolate chip, it's 400 calories.
I could eat a whole pound of potatoes for that same amount of calories.
Yes.
That is just crazy.
And 4 or 5 of those cookies is all you get
for a day.
Calories.
It's all you get for a whole day. That is so crazy. So when people have bashed you or the store saying, well, he allowed, again, to reiterate, he's not recommending 10% of calories from animal products. He's allowing that in people that are not going to go all the way. So what I wanted to know is, and maybe from your perspective, for Matt and Alona, let's say somebody is already an ethical vegan. Would they or you allow 10% of their calories from vegan junk food? Or do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course I do. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, we don't recommend that to people. From a health standpoint, we're actually arguing you should try to eat 100% real foods.
Right.
Does that mean Matt, Alona, and I never eat any junk food? Well, I won't speak for Matt and Alona, but I mean, every once in a while, I'll be guilty of having I might get some coconut milk ice cream, and I mean, it's all about the lifestyle pattern. Mm-hmm. Not perfection is not. I don't think I'm at 10%. If I was to gauge, my percentage is probably closer to the 3% or less for junk food, just because my palate has evolved. But if I'm out at a group and we're at a dinner at a vegan restaurant and somebody orders dessert, am I going to have a bite of that? Peanut butter chocolate bliss at Candle 79. Yeah, I'll have a bite of that.
Wow, you're human. You're human. Wow.
I am more than human. Wow. All too human.
What's your favorite guilty indulgence at your store? I mean, you work at your store, right? Your office is at your Austin store. You're one of my favorites of all your stores. So I'm assuming you eat at your store. I know there's things you sell. You admitted in the book that you would never eat, but what's your favorite thing to grab?
That's a good question. Probably occasionally I'll get a decaf soy milk dark chocolate mocha.
That's terrific. What's your best-selling item, just out of curiosity?
The best-selling item in Whole Foods Market?
Yeah.
In tonnage?
Well, just you mean like
unit sold?
Yeah, either units sold or in revenue. Just curious.
Well, believe it or not, bottled water.
Wow. That is, I would never have guessed that. I would have guessed bananas, because it's like I love your bananas better than other stores. I don't know why. They're just better. You
should, because our bananas are better, and I'll tell you why in
just a second. Really are. They taste better. I don't know what it is, but no other banana tastes as good. Whether I'm getting your organic or conventional, I had a banana yesterday. I could tell it wasn't a Whole Foods banana. Your bananas taste better.
So bananas are the best-selling single produce item.
Wow. So it is a
and
plant food. That's terrific.
Absolutely. And produce, when we look at our Instacart delivery items, I mean, produce has got like 90 of the top 100 items that we sell.
That's fantastic.
So produce definitely rules. And our bananas are better because if you look at the bananas we sell are whole trade, both they're fair trade. They're both the organic and the non-organic. And where in most of our stores we sell the non-organic bananas are Earth from Earth University in Costa Rica. They're very close to being organic. They just use a slight bit of pesticides on that particular banana. But the Costa Rican bananas, if you look at them, if you compare the Earth bananas that are not organic to the organic ones that we're getting from a different country, you'll find that the Earth bananas taste better on the blind taste test because they're just thicker and creamier and richer. So I bet you were eating a Earth banana.
They're delicious. That's all I can tell you.
My wife, I'm under strict instructions to get only organic produce for my wife. But I do occasionally sneak in the Earth non-organic bananas because they just simply taste better.
They're really good.
I know.
I love them. So one of the things I hear is, and I've even heard this from some of the people that you've made heroes in your book, they call your store Whole Paycheck. And for me, I don't complain because the quality, the service, the experience, and, like I say, pay the grocer or pay the doctor. But you say in your book that the poor and working class use meat and dairy products as condiments. And now it's the main dish for every meal, whereas before they couldn't afford to do that. And the people that could were fat or obese because it was a status symbol. And that when processed and refined foods and animal products are so cheap and ubiquitous, the former diet of the poor seems more difficult and expensive by comparison because healthier foods like fruits and vegetables are now more expensive than cheap hamburgers and processed fare. And it's so true.
Well, I've got a lot of thoughts about this, so indulge me while I talk about it.
Absolutely. This is your time.
A lot of different angles. So most of that complaint is misguided. It's misguided for a few different reasons. The first one is that we're spending less money on food in the United States. We spend only 8% of our disposable income on food in the United States. If you go back, 60 years ago, it's closer to 40% of our income was spent on food. If you go back 100 years ago, it was well over 50%. So we're spending a lot less money on food as a percentage of our income than we ever have before. And that's because of the industrialized agricultural system that we have. Animal foods, for example, are far less expensive today than they used to be because of what we do to chickens and what we do to cows. I mean, the type of milk production we get out of cows now due to genetics and due to antibiotics and growth hormones it's causing illness for these cows. And the amount of chickens that we produce in these factory farms is astounding. So the whole system is based on horrible cruelty towards animals. And then you've got subsidized grains and soybeans that make it easier to feed these industrialized animals because the government's footing part of the bill for it. So the whole system it's unethical, it's unsustainable, but it is producing very cheap animal foods. And then you've got the processed foods, which basically have almost no nutrients in them. They've got cheap carbohydrates, they got cheap oil, they got a lot of salt, and they've got refined grains and sugars in them. And it's, if you were to measure it based on nutrient density, those type of foods, so based on calories, it's cheap. But based on actual nutrient density, it's never been more expensive because you're getting calorie density without any nutrients. So it's foods that make us sick. And you pointed out if you add the medical cost in, there's no comparison.
Oh, yeah.
But the type of foods people are eating in processed foods like chips and potato chips and tortilla chips and burgers and fries, these don't have any nutrients in them. They're remarkably unhealthy foods. They have a lot of calories. So you can get fat for not spending very much money.
Absolutely.
You can't get healthy without
no money.
spending a little bit more money.
Absolutely.
If you're going to eat non-industrialized animal foods, and then if you're going to buy grass-fed beef or pasture-raised chicken or pasture-raised eggs, you're going to spend more money for that because you're getting into the real cost. But most people aren't willing to spend that much money because they want the industrialized products. Now, if you're plant-based, so my next thought, if you ate like me and you know how to cook, you actually don't spend that much money.
Absolutely.
Because I'm not buying any animal foods, so I don't have those costs at all. And I buy my beans in bulk. I buy my whole grains in bulk. The healthy starch foods or the whole starch foods are the basis of my calories. I'm buying vegetable oils. And then you buy fruits and vegetables that are in season, and you combine that with the healthy starch foods. That's not very expensive.
No.
Most people don't know how to cook. And they're just not well informed enough to know how to go to the supermarket and buy healthy food and not spend too much money.
You know what? Actually, sorry.
I got one final thought.
Sure.
Well, when the Amazon merger with Whole Foods closes, Whole Paycheck is going to disappear. I mean, Whole Foods Market's going to have the scale of Amazon, and we'll be able to take the long-term perspective. And you're going to see our prices go way down. Wow. I promise you. That Whole Foods is going to get a lot less expensive after the Amazon deal closes.
That's amazing.
I doubt a year from now people will ever say Whole Paycheck over again because we're going to be a lot less expensive.
Wow, and you know I find it's really only if I shop in the prepared food section that I feel it's expensive. You know, I mean, I think your prices on everything else is pretty comparable. You know.
You got to compare our prepared foods what you'd be getting if you go to a restaurant.
Absolutely. No, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying when I get a salad at Whole Foods, it's $20. But if I don't have time to do that at home always, and if I'm traveling, I don't complain at all. So I'm not.
That must be a $20. You're really that's a big salad, or you're putting a lot of potatoes in there.
No, it's always $20, but it is a big salad. But I eat a lot. Is there any item, John, that you just absolutely would refuse to sell or have been asked, and it's just beyond your comprehension that you would ever sell a certain type of item or item like?
Oh, we already don't sell. We have quality standards that forbid about 150 different items. So any items that have these products in them, we're not going to sell. So we don't sell anything. People don't know this, but we don't sell anything with artificial flavorings, colorings, preservatives, or sweeteners in it. So
fantastic.
There is no Diet Coke at Whole Foods Market. Because we don't sell anything that has aspartame in it, or saccharin, or sucralose. We don't permit those products in our stores. We don't sell anything that has hydrogenated oils in it. So we cut all those foods out. So there's thousands of foods that we don't sell.
Excellent.
That meet our standards.
I love it, and I love what you just said about how you can get fat very cheaply now. And you said in the book that for the first time in human history, obesity is a bigger health crisis globally than hunger. Most people suffer a disability as a result of consuming excess calories than as a result of consuming too few. Overfed but undernourished, calorie-rich, and nutrient-poor, this is the deadly paradox. It has trapped hundreds of millions of human beings today. In America, 69% of adults are overweight, 36% obese, 17% of kids are obese, and more than 1 million die every year from heart disease, cancer, and more than 15 million are diabetic and pre-diabetic. And I'm sure they're not the ones that are shopping at Whole Foods.
Or if they are, they're not buying the right foods.
You're right. They're not shopping the perimeters. I don't know if you know. I actually did a Whole Foods tour for Dr. Hans Deal, the Complete Health Improvement, and I did a Whole Foods shopping tour, and I showed people how to shop and buy the healthiest things.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
I'll send you the video.
I have to admit, when I'm shopping, I'm a grocery cart voyeur. I'm looking around to see what people are buying, and I kind of want to go over there, put my arm and say, don't buy that food. That's not really right.
It's so funny. It's like I feel like I'm the nutrient police too, John, because when I shop, I can almost look at the cart and then figure out their weight before I look up. It's so true. The correlation between animal products and processed food and fruits and vegetables, it's amazing.
I mean, if you look at my grocery cart, it's almost completely full of nothing but produce, and then foods I get in the bulk departments, beans and grains and nuts and seeds. And that's pretty much it. It doesn't take me much time to shop because in my store here in Austin, the bulk department's right next to it's right next to the produce department, so I can cover the whole. It's a big store, 80,000 square feet, but I only have to shop about 20% of it.
That's fantastic. When I first met you a little over 7 years ago, it was at an Engine to Immersion in Austin. And I'm not sure people know that you have these programs for your employees. I mean, I'm self-employed, but I don't know any other employer. And when people complain, it's like, look what you're doing for your employees. You have these stories in your book where you talk about some of them that have lost significant amount of weight and reversed their disease. But was this your idea to do the immersion? And why can't every company do what you're doing for their employees?
Well, every company, of course, could do it. It'll be interesting to see after the deal with Amazon closes whether or not I'll be able to persuade Amazon to send some of their people through our programs. I'm sure that I will be able to, but we've got to wait till the deal closes to find out. I guess because most companies don't believe. They're like everybody else. They're asleep. They don't think diet makes much difference. That they believe that if you want to do a wellness program, it's about getting people to exercise more. And it's about fitness and not health. And that they don't want to do anything too controversial. So what happened was I got to know some of these giants like McDougall and Furman and I think I knew McDougall was doing his 10-day programs, and I think I was talking to him, and he said, you ought to send some of your employees through my 10-day program.
Wow.
So then I thought about it. I said, why don't we just do a custom program for? I think so. That was the very first one that we did, and then I thought, well, Furman he'll do a program, and so we ended up getting 4 different programs, and we've now sent over 4,000 people through those programs. And each costs about $4,000 to send a team member through for a 1-week program, fully medically supervised. But here's the thing. The results are unbelievable. What happens to people in a little over a week or at a week is astounding. You can drop 10 pounds of weight if you're obese. You can have your cholesterol drop 50 or 60 points. Your blood pressure drop 30 points. Your blood sugar begin to normalize. You can begin to get off your meds if you're diabetic. I see this because when I travel around and tour our stores, every store I go into, team members come up and hug me and thank me for having something through an immersion, saying, you saved my life. And this is a win-win-win program. It costs us $4,000 to do that, and part of it's altruism because we just care about the health of our team, of our team members. But guess what? We're self-insured. We're paying the health costs for our team members who get ill. And how much money do you think the health company spends on my health insurance or my health care? 0.
Right.
I'm about to turn 64, but I don't generate any health care costs because I don't get sick.
Yeah.
And I don't have any chronic diseases. So if everybody was as healthy as me, then our healthcare bill would be 0. So if we can get our sickest team members to restore them to perfect health, well, that's going to be a win for the company as well. We're going to spend less money on healthcare. So I do think over time, more companies will adopt this because it's demonstrably true that if people will change their diets to eat a whole foods plant-based diet, they're going to reverse chronic diseases. And they're going to cost their company a lot less money in healthcare, as well as showing up to work healthy and more vitality and more vigor. So it will win out in the long run, but it's going to take a generation or 2. First of all, there's so much false information out there. You're continually fighting against wrong-headed ideas that, again, people are very eager to believe.
Right.
So, but I will say that our total health immersion has been a huge, huge home run for Whole Foods Market. I look forward to expanding it when we merge with Amazon.
Oh, that's amazing. I'd love to teach at those because I think they're fantastic. I've been to one of them.
If Amazon goes in for it, then we're going to need a lot more immersions. So we're going to have to recruit doctors. So we'll see.
That's terrific. And what I also love about your store is the people seem genuinely happy to be working there. They're always. It's just such a great store to go into wherever I've been. The Health Starts Here items, I'm having a hard time finding them. I used to be able to find many items in the refrigerated and prepared section that were oil-free, sugar-free, and low sodium, but I'm having a hard time finding them now. Did they disappear?
I think Some stores are still doing a good job with it, but others have drifted away from it, primarily because we're always getting new chefs who don't know how to cook healthy. And because we're not defining clearly what health starts here, most people, customers don't know what it is. So I'm very aware of this problem. I'm thinking about reinitiating it, maybe calling it the Whole Foods Diet program instead of Health Starts Here. And but I'm determined to get those foods back into our stores. So
thank you, because I really enjoyed them, and
I travel around. I can't, if I go into a Whole Foods and I can't get anything that didn't have oil on it, or refined grains, then I'm not very happy.
I would definitely buy that and recommend that. So, last question, just for fun, I always ask all my guests this: who has influenced John Mackey most in his life to make you become the maverick you are today?
Probably the person that's influenced me the most is myself. And I mean that in the sense that I've taken responsibility for my own life from a very early age. I decided to follow my heart wherever it took me. I began to self-educate myself, and so I hold myself responsible. But in the spirit of what your question is, that my father, no doubt, had the biggest influence on me, particularly had an influence on me in business. I started this business, and I'd never, if you look at my resume, it's dishwasher, busboy, boys camp counselor, CEO of Whole Foods Market. I never took any business classes at school. So, but my father, so he really mentored me. First decade or so, he really, really taught me a lot. And then there have been certain intellectual people, a philosopher I studied under the University of Texas when I went to school there. Bob Solomon had a big influence on me. And then, of course, various friends, probably from a healthy eating standpoint, Colin Campbell, McDougall, Furman, and Greger have had the biggest influences on me.
All the heroes. I love the story in your book where you had dinner with Milton Friedman. That was one of my favorite things, and I wonder if that was a very cute story. I won't tell you guys the story. You have to read the book to find out the story of the dinner. So thank you so much, John, for taking the time. And guys, this is a great book, not just for the recipes, but for everything in it, including John Mackey's story. It's called The Whole Foods Diet. We'll end with my very favorite line from your book. If someone offered you a pill that had been shown to prevent and reverse heart disease, type 2 diabetes, lower cholesterol and blood pressure and body weight, and significantly reduce your risk of getting multiple types of cancer, extend your lifespan, and make you look and feel great, would you hesitate to take it? It may not come in a bottle, but a whole foods plant-based diet has been shown to do just that. So thank you so much for your time, for your work, and for your incredible store.
Thank you, Chef AJ. We're going to get on the Health Starts Here stuff.
Perfect. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious.